Let's talk a little bit about the story around freezing Russian assets. How are EU leaders approaching it?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be one of the most critical points that they're going to be able to talk about and try to make some progress on, which is these 260 billion euros that are being held right now by the G7, 200 of which are being held in here in Europe right now. And they're all throwing off about 3 billion euros a year. So there's the short-term needs of Ukraine, which are ammunition, long-range missiles, that sort of thing. But there's the longer-term question about how to fund Ukraine, how to get money to Ukraine, which is obviously a critical issue both in Europe, but also in the United States, judging by the fact that that $60 billion package is still stuck in Congress. So one of the ways that they're thinking about doing it is tapping some of these Russian assets, the profits from them, and bringing them directly to Ukraine. The issue is within Europe, you do not have unanimity on that. You need that. So they're thinking about maybe fudging it where they say about 90% of it will go to weapons, 10% will go to reconstruction because some of the member states are less comfortable with funding military equipment directly. But there's also another idea, and this came up with the Ukrainian Prime Minister. Have a listen.
Now, European Union have made first step, confiscation of revenue of these frozen Russian assets and usage this for Ukrainian needs, for urgent Ukrainian needs. And we believe that this is only the good sign and only the first step. And we continue discussion how legally and politically organize this confiscation of frozen Russian assets.
And so the conversation right now in Europe is about the profits from those assets. But what he's talking about is seizing the underlying assets themselves. We're talking about €250 billion worth of assets, which would obviously fund Ukraine for a long time. It's not a surprise that the Ukrainians want that. But Joe Biden wants that. The U.S. wants that. And they want to make meaningful steps in progress in discussing how they could use those assets to fund Ukraine. There's resistance from that from the French, from the Germans, even from the ECB, saying that it could sort of threaten the euro as a reserve currency. And really, obviously, that's one of the pillars, not seizing private property in liberal democratic states. But again, if there's ever an exception for that, it can be in times of war.